Okay, I do not want to hold us up any longer, and we will be recording this and posting the recording on our YouTube page. So folks that are coming in late should be able to go back and see this online. So to get started, good afternoon. Welcome to the Illinois Solar for All Evaluator RFP Stakeholder Feedback Session. My name is Jennifer Schmidt, and I am the Senior Program Manager for Illinois Solar for All. Along with the IPA Planning and Procurement Chief Jim Rowland, I'll be responsible for hosting this discussion today. So to get started, let's go over some housekeeping items. To reduce any background noise, all participants are muted upon entry. We will be taking questions from our audience towards the end, so please feel free to submit questions at any time during the discussion. To submit questions, please use the chat feature at the bottom of your Zoom window. Today's session is being recorded. A recorded version of this session will be available on the IPA website under announcements. Next slide. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me go over the agenda first. So our agenda for this afternoon, we just did the housekeeping. I'm going to briefly cover what the evaluator selection process timeline is. We'll be having an RFQ and RFP process. The origin of our evaluation activities from within the IPA Act. Some overview of what the evaluation activities have been for Illinois Solar for All to date. I'll cover our proposed evaluation report approach, and then we'll have time for questions. Well, I'll share the questions that we released for feedback, and then we'll have time for a Q&A. And then we'll be wrapping up with a refresher of the deadlines for this feedback process. All right, thank you. So our timeline for this process, as I mentioned, we're going to be doing an RFQ, RFP process. So we're doing the request for feedback right now. That was released on December 2nd, and we ask for responses by December 20th. Then we plan to release the request for qualifications in late January of 2025. And those qualification responses will be due in mid-February, and we intend to announce the qualified responses in late February. And we'll announce those at the same time that we publish our request for proposals. And the request for proposals will be open only to the qualified proposers from the RFQ. So we will publish the RFP in late February. Those responses will be due in early April, and then we intend to announce our selected evaluator in late April 2025. And so this assumes a beginning of activities at the beginning of the fiscal year in July 2025. Next slide. So in the IPA Act, Section 156B6 of the Illinois Power Agency Act, and I don't usually read slides, but this one is pretty foundational. So at least every 2 years, the agency shall select an independent evaluator to review and report on the Illinois Solar for All program and the performance of the third-party program administrator of the Illinois Solar for All program. The evaluation shall be based on objective criteria developed through a stakeholder process, which is this. The process shall include feedback and participation from Illinois Solar for All program stakeholders, including participants and organizations in environmental justice and historically underserved communities. The report shall include a summary of the evaluation of the Illinois Solar for All program based on the stakeholder developed objective criteria. So in addition to the agency's ongoing commitment to shape what we do by stakeholder feedback, it's required in the IPA Act that as we approach the evaluation, that we are including our stakeholders' thoughts and opinions on how we should be shaping our evaluation. And I think it's really important because there are a variety of stakeholders for Illinois Solar for All, and we want our evaluations to be valuable to all stakeholders, and we want them to be accessible to all stakeholders. So we really do value the the feedback in this process to help us make the evaluation reports useful for our stakeholders. Next slide. So this is just an overview of our second cycle of evaluation reports. We do have an overview of our first cycle of evaluation reports at the end of this presentation. This is only covering our second round of evaluation reports because we're proposing the same process and same model and cadence of reports that we have for our current cycle. So this consists of, for our current cycle of evaluation, we had a mid-year evaluation report that was released in January 2024 that specifically addressed barriers and opportunities for improving our Illinois Solar for All residential solar small sub program. Then we released our program year 4 annual evaluation report in July of this year. And then we have a number of reports that are currently in process. We have a mid-year evaluation report that we're expecting early in 2025 about income verification. We are also expecting early in 2025 the program year 5 annual evaluation report. And then already that's in process, we have a mid-year evaluation report that's focused on grassroots education efficacy, and a program year 6 evaluation report that we anticipate releasing in late spring or early summer 2025. And then for this cycle of evaluation reports, this will be covering the program years 7 and 8, as well as some mid-year reports. So next slide, please. So as I mentioned, our proposed evaluation report approach is similar to how we have been doing it in this current cycle. So it's similar to what we proposed last time, with a few lessons of how many mid-year reports we can reasonably get into 1 year. So the purpose of our evaluation reports, as included in the IPA Act, we are supposed to be providing metrics, experiences, and program recommendations, and a comprehensive snapshot and analysis of the program in context of the program's goals. For the structure, we're continuing our cadence of 2 annual reports, 1 for each year, and I did not update that slide to be, oh no, this is right, covering PYs 25 and 26. That will include the program metrics analysis and experience reporting. We have we expect research from surveys, interviews, and we also will expect improvement recommendations from the evaluator. Our annual reports are also expected to include an executive summary report, and we think this is a really important feature of our annual reports because those annual reports can be pretty hefty and include a lot of information. And we really think it's important for our stakeholders to have that summary report that's a little more digestible and is more upfront with the findings and recommendations. Then we also intend to continue having mid-year reports that are more focused on single topics. We propose 1 or 2 per year, and just for context, in our most recent cycle, we will have 3 mid-year reports in a 2-year cycle. So 1 or 2 per year is what we're targeting for our next cycle. And these topical mid-year reports provide a targeted analysis of specific issues that we're having within Illinois Solar for All or that we're wanting to tackle. Next slide. As I mentioned before, these annual evaluation reports will be covering program years 7 and 8. So that is PYs 24 and 25. I'm sorry, 25 and 26. And then the evaluation has to evaluate a number of elements that are in the IPA Act. And I'm not going to be reading through all these. And then the IPA further proposes to analyze these metrics with the following factors. We're proposing by sub-program for distributed generation and community solar, the business model, geographic regions, and other socioeconomic and demographic characteristics. Next slide. So our evaluation reports, we think, need to have two major focuses, the economic, social, and environmental benefits of the program, and then also the job and job opportunities that are created. Illinois Solar for All includes a requirement for Illinois trainees to be included in the development of Illinois Solar for All projects. And so we want to ensure that we're also tracking and sharing what the outcomes of those additional jobs are. Additionally, the evaluation should also consider program performance metrics and the evaluation of the program administrator's performance. So we also see these evaluation reports as an opportunity to look at how we are implementing Illinois Solar for All and where we might be able to make improvements to improve the experience of both our approved vendors and our customers. And then again, we added some additional detail in our appendix of this presentation for evaluation elements and metrics. Next slide. So some of our ideas for mid-year report evaluation, a lot of these are very similar to what we proposed last time, and we have not included we haven't done mid-year reports on these topics yet. And so our current ideas are 1 to 4 unit generation participation. I know we already did a report on this, but it is an ongoing concern. So I don't rule it out as a mid-year report that might still have value as a look back on how we might have improved the program or how we might continue to improve the program. An analysis on the program's incorporation of DEI goals. Income distribution of Solar for All participants within the 80% area median income standard. So are Illinois Solar for All participants are they spread across the range of income guidelines that we accept, or are we seeing, for instance, a cluster of participation in either very high or very low income levels? We're interested in finding out what the actual participant savings that have been achieved are compared to what we expect participant savings to be. We are working on a mid-year report on income verification. I think there's still some more information or some more analysis that might be done for that. And then the impact of these job training requirements, and then also an analysis of the energy sovereignty incentives. Next. So the questions that we included in our request for feedback. Does the proposed evaluation plan of developing 1 or 2 brief mid-year reports with the comprehensive year-end report and summary sufficiently balance the need to comprehensively evaluate the program and the need to provide time between evaluations to implement recommendations and assess results? Just to elaborate on that a little bit, in the appendix of this presentation where we review the evaluation reports that were released as part of our first evaluation cycle, you can see that the evaluation reports were released on a rather rapid cadence. So we did a phase 1 evaluation that covered program planning, and then we had program evaluation reports every 6 months. And what we found from the IPA's perspective was that those reports were really coming too fast for us to take those recommendations and get them implemented so that those fixes could be assessed. So considering that the mid-year reports would be limited to 3 to 4 maximum topics, with having 1 to 2 reports per year, what topics would stakeholders like to see addressed in the focused mid-year reports? And we provided some examples of some ideas that the IPA has had about mid-year reports, but we are of course open to stakeholders' needs of what they would find useful for mid-year reports. The second question we're asking, what metrics and indicators should be evaluated to assess the program's incorporation of diversity, equity, and inclusion? the IPA is increasingly looking at the goals of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and making sure that those are represented in our implementation of programs. And so we would like stakeholders' input on what do you think that would look like. Third question, what audiences will use these evaluation reports? What particular information would be useful and in what formats? So as I mentioned earlier, we understand that we have a wide variety of stakeholders in Illinois Solar for All, and we want our evaluations to be useful to everyone. So part of that is knowing who is reading our evaluation reports and how are they being used. So we do hope to hear from a variety of our stakeholders and just get a sense of how folks are using these and what are your impressions of how they've been released. Are those working for you? What recommendations would you have to improve them? Given that the data for Illinois Shines projects would not include demographic information, is there analysis of Solar for All system metrics against the Illinois Shines system metrics that would be useful for stakeholders? And then fifth, what additional objective criteria should be evaluated? We're open to recommendation for any ideas that stakeholders might have, how we might add to our evaluation reporting. So any additional ideas that are not represented within these questions, we are open to hearing your thoughts and ideas. Next slide, please. So responses are due to the ipa.ilsfa.illinois.gov email address by Friday, December 20th. And we have a standard for the subject line that we request that you use. Just as a heads up, this ipa.ilsfa email address is not the same as our previous email address that we've often used for these, the IPA Solar email address. So just make sure that when you're sending your responses, you're using the correct email address, ipa.ilsfa@illinois.gov. Just as a heads up, these responses will be published on both the Illinois Solar for All and IPA websites. So if you wish to designate portions of your response as confidential or proprietary, you should also submit a redacted version for us to publish. Next slide. So we can go over any questions that have been placed in the chat. Kim Knowles has a question. Do you know what methods will be used to measure social benefits or have been used in the past? Off the top of my head, I don't have them handy, but we do have the, I don't have my other screens up so I don't mess up the internet. So I can't look them up at the moment, but Kim, I can connect with you and they would be available in the previous evaluation reports. Sounds good. Thanks. Any other questions or feedback?
I have a question since no one else is going.
That's fine. What's up, Kim?
So I was just thinking about in the past, so for those who don't know, I'm co-chairing what's called the Illinois Solar for All Working Group. It's part of the Illinois Clean Jobs Coalition. And in the past, frankly, we haven't really used these. So I was thinking, well, what would make them more useful? And then I was thinking, well, obviously, if the evaluators made recommendations and then IPA actually followed, IPA followed up on those recommendations. And I'm wondering what the process is for that. So there's the long-term report, of course, but is there some other process whereby IPA intends to take those recommendations and start implementing them? Or is it really like the intention is we'll do it in the long-term plan?
No, any of these, well, for the evaluator, is this about feedback on the evaluation or feedback more generally?
on the program, like the evaluators evaluating
Okay.
the program,
Okay.
how's it going?
Sure.
This, yeah.
Yeah. So the evaluations that we've had and mid-year reports that we've had, we have not traditionally done a formal response, but we've incorporated those edits and recommendations into our updates of our long-term plan, but also our other documents like the approved vendor manual and project selection protocol, things like that. I think there is room for improvement in how we can be more transparent of how we are using the evaluation reports as far as the recommendations. So one thing that I think we can do is be more obvious when we are making changes as a result of those evaluation reports, whether they're the annual or mid-year reports. I think we could probably do a better job of calling out the recommendations that were proposed in those and where they're being used in the proposals for updates to our program materials.
Thanks.
That's a good question, though.
Yeah, there's a lot going on and it can be hard to and to track it all, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know. Other questions or feedback about evaluation? Well, I don't want to keep people needlessly, but let's go over the timeline
I
before
have a
we wrap up.
question.
Yeah, Marina.
Um, I know that the request for feedback listed or said when the evaluations would come out each year. Do you know when the mid-year reports would come out?
For
Like
this cycle or for the proposed cycle?
proposed cycle?
We do not have set dates with those. I don't think it would be, I don't think we could really set those timelines without the assistance of the evaluator. I think, of course, we would have goals to get the annual reports completed within 6 to 9 months of when a program year is completed. And I think we said that in our request for feedback. But I don't want to set any firm timelines without the input of whoever is selected as the evaluator, because there's going to be research that they would have to do, interviews, surveys, whatever methods they're going to be using for their evaluation reports. And we want to make sure that our timelines are mindful of what those development timelines would be.
Okay.
But with the I mean, it would, within a 2-year cycle of these reports, it would be a fairly it would be a pretty condensed timeline as far as it would be fitting within those 2 years.
Can I ask, to date, how useful has the agency found the evaluations?
Um, I'm actually not sure if I can answer that.
Like you're not allowed or you don't know?
I we found the reports incredibly useful as far as having an independent set of eyes on the program. The reports also, I think, have also been useful to the program administrator, identifying where there have been concerns about their performance and where approved vendors and grassroots educators are having some pain points in they're functioning within the program. So I think the annual reports have been incredibly helpful in just looking at the overall program administration. We have found the mid-year reports that are targeted on specific topics to be useful in a fresh perspective, an outside perspective on issues that we're seeing in Illinois Solar for All that we haven't been able to really get a good handle on from the inside. So the first mid-year report on the small residential subprogram, to a certain extent, some of the findings were not surprising. I think they're the same findings that we've been hearing from approved vendors for a long time. And there are recommendations that we could implement, and there are some other recommendations that we think need some more discussion. But overall, we are pleased enough with these reports that we are proposing the same structure and the same cadence. So to that extent, I think we've been finding the reports very helpful and useful. And at this point, we're not proposing any changes to the types of reports that we're looking at. Is that helpful?
I mean, Jen, to that point, and I just want to kind of corroborate that I think the reports provide a great additional point of information of kind of review and feedback, in addition to other stakeholder feedback that we may receive at different points throughout the year. So it's a great independent review of how things are progressing, both throughout the year as well as in targeted topics, that I think is valuable from that independence and that deep dive. And just like any feedback, there are some things that we can use immediately. There are some things for future consideration or additional baking that are required before we try to pursue. But I think to that point and Jen's point of our proposal going forward is more or less the same. And that is because of the value that we're receiving out of it at this point. Obviously, subject to any feedback from all of you about new or different ways of doing things that could help improve the process.
I think one change to note in our proposal this time from the last time is in our last cycle of evaluations, we were catching up from a time lag. And so the previous evaluation cycle included 3 annual reports, and this one would only have 2. And then, like I mentioned, our goal moving forward is to bring those annual reports to be released within 6 to 9 months following the completion of that program year. But like I also mentioned, we also don't want to make promises without working those out with our evaluator.
I had another question. I know throughout the proposal, there's mention of like varying demographic information. Is that information collected from like the approved vendor or program administrator during the process, or is there a survey that is sent out to program participants by the evaluator?
The income verification process, the certification and consent form, I think it's called, includes some demographic questions about the participant.
Okay, so that's where all of that information is coming from, you'd say? Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Okay, let's go back to our slide with the timeline on it. Okay, There we go. All right, so we are needing responses for this feedback request by December 20th. We plan to publish the request for qualifications in late January. And those responses will be due in late February, and we'll be announcing the qualified responses in late February, and now those will be announced when we publish the request for proposals. The RFP will be open to only the qualified responders to the RFQ process. The proposal responses will be due in early April, and then we intend to announce our selection in late April, with the work beginning in July. So I think that is a pretty good timeline for this process to get an evaluator in place in time for the next fiscal year. So, but that's also pretty condensed. Hopefully it's avoiding the holidays though. Any other questions or feedback before we wrap up? All right. Well, thank you all very much. We really do hope that you respond to our request. We do really value the feedback. We want our evaluation reports to be useful, not just to us, but to our stakeholders. So we really appreciate your time attending this workshop, for asking questions, and we also really appreciate your feedback. So thank you very much. I hope you have lovely holiday season, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks.
Thank you all.
Thank you, IPA.